Morning, Professor Spooner. How are you?
Good morning, Frank. I'm fine, thanks, and you too, I hope.
Thank you.
This has been an interesting week because of what the BBC has been doing. I think we've talked before about how our lives are changing as a result of globalization. And we've talked probably before about the need for more global organization of the health industry. But I don't think we've said anything about the fact that we may be, our lives may be changing physically as a result of globalization. And this is something that I haven't thought about myself either until recently when I noticed that the BBC had started a series of programs on just this problem. Mm-hmm. Apparently, the complaints that most people have that take them to the doctors now are becoming very different from what they used to be. And the BBC is suggesting, or the people who are organizing this series of programs on the BBC are suggesting that this has to do with the way our lives are changing as a result of globalization. And the first thing they focused on was feet. We're using our feet differently. And this is something apparently that began to change 10,000 years ago when we stopped walking around in bare feet and started wearing shoes, or at least I'm not sure when we started wearing shoes, but certainly a long time ago. And of course, if you see the shoes some women wear, you're not surprised that it might change their feet.
And that they have feet problems.
I'm sure those of us who don't wear high heels assume that our shoes helped our feet rather than making them more, giving them problems. So apparently the feet are such complicated parts of our body. I forget now how many bones, there's sort of 20 odd bones in the foot and so many different ligaments apart from muscles. And obviously the way we're using them in our shoes now is however good our shoes are, is very different from the way we used to use them. And so our feet are changing, and we're all getting flat feet. And our feet are becoming weaker. That is, they won't do all the things they used to do. And they're getting bigger. Mm-hmm. Well, I've always been careful not to wear shoes at home, to walk around in bare feet and to run up and down stairs and things like that, thinking that was good for my feet. And now I'm doing more of that. But the next thing that came on this past week was everything about backs. Apparently, everybody's got a sore back these days. And it ranges from spinal stenosis, where the relationship between the different vertebrae of your spine is narrowing, presumably because of the way I'm sitting now talking to you. And it's very difficult for us now to maintain the posture that we were evolved to maintain without thinking about it. And so, well, you hear people complaining about back pain all the time. So one wonders what the next thing's going to be.
Well, let me ask you a question. I mean, anecdotally, I would agree with you. I hear from many people about feet and back pain, endlessly it seems. But in the framework of globalization, can we talk a little bit about that? I mean, for example, 500 years ago, feet and back were being used in much different ways by the majority of the population. People were walking greater distances. Many of them were perhaps wearing the same pair of shoes for years at a time, or at least after adulthood when their feet stopped growing, and would use those pairs of shoes for work, for relaxation, for for play, whatever you want to call it. And at the same token, their backs were being used perhaps much more intensively than today for physical labor. So what's happening? Certainly, people are using their feet in a much more sedentary manner, not walking great distances, wearing multiple pairs of shoes for multiple occasions, athletic trainers for brief walks, formal shoes, play shoes, that kind of thing. And backs, people rarely exercise their backs until they are forced to lift something occasionally, and then will throw their back out of whack. Is it that the style of life that we've been afforded or cursed with, depending upon how you want to look at it, has caused the usage of these things to deteriorate?
I think the way we use our bodies has been changing at an accelerating pace ever since we started cultivating. So, I mean, before the Industrial Revolution, when the primary type of work was had to do with cultivation in fields, think of all the stooping and bending, which was different from hunting and gathering. And that obviously affects the back, though it may not affect the feet so much. But then the Industrial Revolution changed things much more. And then in the 20th century, when fewer people have been working in factories and more people have been doing what you and I are doing now, sitting looking at a screen.
Right, right. But our it's a very interesting point. Our bodies evolved in a mode to respond to the hunting and gathering requirements. And in a relatively brief period, a blink of an eye, we've gone from hunting and gathering to looking at each other on computer screens. So we still have the bodies of the hunting and gathering requirements, but at the same token, we've not used those capabilities, and they're dormant. And when they're occasionally exercised, we react with pain.
Well, one wonders how, because the medical profession doesn't think in terms of historical processes and what's going to happen in the future. And so the people that we go to for back pain are trying to repair our bodies in the way that we understand they used to be. One wonders, as we begin to think more globally and the health profession begins to be more globally organized, and we see how the type of medical complaints that people have in different parts of the world differs enormously, and we try to understand that in terms of one particular, one body, whether things will change. After all, we obviously our exercising. When those of us who exercise regularly and try to look after our bodies as well as we can, we're trying to maintain our bodies in the way that they had evolved to function, and they don't really function that way anymore.
Well, go ahead.
I think that I've gained an enormous amount from having spent some 10, 15 years doing research that involved wandering around in desert environments and just walking all day, every day. So, I mean, I'm lucky in that way. But since that ceased, I've been doing what most other people do, just sitting like this. And if we all finish up sitting like this, then presumably our bodies are going to change.
Well,
it's not going to be possible to maintain them in the form that they had evolved. Well, evolution is continuing.
Well, that's an interesting point. I read your piece about globalization and anthropology. Thank you for sending it. And you talked about how globalization is how anthropology is one of the few subject areas that really considers the future as much as the past and the present. And when you reference the medical profession, trying to return our bodies to the state that they were meant to, i.e., the hunting and gathering stage. It's possible to foresee a time, perhaps in the not too distant future, when the medical profession will respond to back and feet complaints more in line with what they're currently being used for, i.e., sitting, not too much walking, being able to continue to function in office and desk jobs and to pursue a sedentary lifestyle. And that's simply going to be it's almost like a car insurance kind of, or a home insurance thing. They'll give you the price of the computer at the market value if it's stolen from your car, not the price that you bought it at. The medical professional said, all right, we're not going to return your body to the hunting gathering state where you can run for 15 miles and chase a buffalo. We're going to return your body to the state where you can sit at your computer and type away at a keyboard. And what's wrong with that? I guess I don't necessarily know that there is anything wrong with
Well,
that.
I'm glad you brought up the issue of running. Obviously, athletics. Some people become athletes and use their bodies very differently. And now the amazing thing that's happened in the past week is that because athletics for women and athletics for men are organized separately, if they've begun to ask questions about what is a typical female physique and what is a typical male physique. And if you happen to be a woman and don't have the same typical physique, then you can't compete. You see that one has been disqualified from competing.
I saw that
in running because she had the wrong. I don't even know what the technical terms are, but the wrong amount of testosterone or something like that.
I saw that. I'm not sure what the response to that is. I don't think that was right.
It's very strange,
Yeah.
but it makes one wonder what else is going to happen when people perform differently in different professions.
Well, it's definitely going to happen because it really, when you think of it, it's not that long from how long ago did cultivation start of crops and things?
About 10,000 years.
Okay, and how long have human species been around?
Well, depends what you think was at what point they became what you would call human, because it's sometimes talked about in terms of a few 100,000 years, and sometimes in a million or more.
Okay.
But I think say 400,000 years would be a good.
All right. So
it's amazing what we've achieved in a relatively short period.
Right. So 10,000 years ago, or 10,001 years ago, we were still in the hunting gathering stage.
Yeah.
And if that's the numerator, over the denominator of 400,000 years, it's not too long a period of time since we were hunters and gatherers. And now look what we're doing. We're so far from that, it's not even funny.
And the point is that up until fairly recently, everything that caused us to change was adaptation to climate change.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we stopped hunting and gathering and started doing other things. But now, the way we change is adaptation to each other, because there's more and more of us, and we have to interact differently. So it's very difficult to work out scenarios for future evolution.
Well, it could be that climate change will force us to change again. We don't know that. So,
well, but with larger and larger numbers of minds working together, we're more capable of organizing or having new ideas and just working out what to do. So there's plenty of grounds for optimism as well.
I hope you're right. All right, Brian. A pleasure as always. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant Memorial Day weekend.
Oh, thank you, and same to you.
Thank you.